Bishop Rose, I'd like to start with something which I expect comes up for you quite a lot in your role as the Bishop of Dover, which is immigration and people crossing the Channel. How do you feel that the government is dealing with that as an issue at the moment?
I think as an issue at the moment, I fear that what we are seeing is a sort of sticking plaster, an echo chamber actions that we see being taken. So it doesn't feel as if anyone in government is actually grabbing this by the horn and actually saying, we don't just want to deal with the surface in terms of people turning up. We want to go deeper. We want to ask, why are people coming? What is motivating? What is driving people away from their homelands? I mean, no one in their right minds want to leave a warm, beautiful, sunshine, beautiful beaches and lush vegetation and come to a freezing cold country. So let's get that straight. I'm here because my husband happens to be a Geordie. Otherwise, I would be enjoying the beautiful beaches in Montego Bay and the sunshine all the time. So there's something happening in people's lives. And it's no good that as a government, we hear the sounds of we're going to break the economic model. That is absolutely irrelevant. What they need to attend to is why people are moving. And actually, because it is impacting politically in this country, if not for humanitarian reasons, I would like our government, our country, to take the lead amongst the international community in addressing this issue.
So the Prime Minister's idea of addressing this issue is to break what he calls the cycle. And to do that, the proposal is that anybody who arrives illegally, that's their description, in the UK, crossing the Channel, would be barred from claiming asylum in this country. They would be detained, their case would be heard, and then they would be removed either to their country of origin or potentially to Rwanda. How do you feel about that as a policy to try and stop people from making that dangerous crossing?
When people are desperate, ridiculous policies are not going to make any difference whatsoever. So, for example, the sense of desperation means that individuals will take risk because they see that risk as less than what they're leaving behind. The hunger, the poverty, the war, the climate change situation. And I think every human being has the right to seek to improve their lives and that of their families. And so it's important that the government here actually engages with that. Talking about, when they come, then we will hear their case and get, we have thousands and thousands of people who've been sitting in hotels or in detention centers. We have been, I can't think of the word, we have not been able to deal with the backlog, never mind the promises that are being made now. So
if the proposal is ridiculous, in your words, as a policy, what is the solution as you see it?
Well, the solution, of course I'm not advocating for let's just open the borders and just let's have people flow backwards and forwards, etc. What I'm saying is, let's put ourselves, and actually, I think it is a failure to put ourselves in the shoes of those who are trying to find a better life that is resulting in the kind of policies that people are coming up with. They're sitting around with the back of an envelope and writing things down that they think might sound like a political vote winner. This is too big a problem to be kicked around because it's a vote winner on this side or not on the other side. So I would like to see our government working internationally with perhaps through the United Nations, and if not through the United Nations, with a group of other governments here in the West where people are coming, to begin to determine what are the issues, and actually to work with those countries where people are coming from. So there has to be that kind of engagement. We have cut the international development money that we've been sending abroad. We can't cut that money and then, worry about people coming. And we can't just deal with people when they get here, because people are dying. We know that people are dying. We've just had that incident of Italy. We've had our own situation here in the Channel where people have died. So we know that's a reality. And that ought to be a real wake-up call for us. But I'm afraid it isn't. And that's simply because it is still being used. Migration is still being used as a political football. You called the government's policy in this area a vote winner, that some of the policy is designed to try and win votes. They believe it is. Can you explain to me why you think they see it in that way? Because that says something about the population that they think they're speaking to, doesn't it? Precisely. If you think about how the Brexit debate happened, and I know, there are many people who say, oh no, it had nothing to do with migration. Really? I don't believe that for 1 minute. If you look at the thousands of people from Turkey who is going to join the Europe and then get access here, just around the time when we are still having terrorist bombings here in this country, of course that is going to appeal to certain people to vote in a particular way. And I'm saddened that intelligent political leaders did that. It is very difficult when things are not going right, and we saw it in Germany, when things are not going right in one's country, what we do, we look for those whom we can blame. So who are we blaming? Because we have not got enough housing. We're blaming the immigrants because they've come and they've taken our houses. And nobody comes out and corrects that, political leaders, to say, no, actually, we hold their hands up. We haven't built enough homes. We have sold off homes, but we haven't reinvested the money in building. So look also at what and who we blame because we haven't got jobs. It's because they've taken our jobs. Now, I heard Mr. Johnson, when he was PM at a party conference, saying that they're going to, we're not going to go to the lowest common denominator of paying, by having people in. What we were doing, we're undercutting. The government could fix that. The government could actually say no one is to be paid below a certain level, and that would have fixed that problem. So we're always looking for people to blame. Immigrants get blamed, and in particular, immigrants who don't sound like us and look like us. And so what we're doing, we're setting up one part of the community against another part of the community. Let's cut to the chase. I mean, are you suggesting that the government's way of looking at this is racist? Well, I don't want to ban the sort of racism language around. I'm just saying that it is a reality that our government, and it's not just the present government, I think over the years, what we have seen is a particular appeal to a certain group of voters, because people know if we touch on that particular point and we sounded tough on it, then people are going to vote for us. So we're pandering to a particular group of people.
I would like to pick up on something specifically in this debate, which is the language that politicians use when they discuss immigration. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has used language like invasion to describe people coming across the channel in small boats. How does that make you feel?
Saddened, deeply saddened when so-called intelligent political leaders again appeal to the lowest common denominator, because that is bound to, rile up a certain group of people.
And is there another element to this, which is that Suella Braverman is the daughter of parents who came to this country as immigrants? They were seeking a better life. They were, they made a home and a life here and had a family here. Is there an expectation that, for somebody like her with that life experience, that they wouldn't be using this kind of language in this kind of debate?
But you see, what has happened? We so easily forget where we are coming from. And the reality is that if the laws being proposed now, in the way we treat those who come to our shores, were actually in place, then so many of our political leaders who are children of immigrant parents, they wouldn't be here, and they wouldn't have the success stories that we see today. So I think there's a huge responsibility that because we have climbed up the ladder, we need to be careful we don't kick the ladder away. If we want to address the issue, clearly, why not have safe routes where people can go and apply for asylum or to migrate? Why don't we do that? Yeah. But we don't. And people, people already have families here. Many people already have families here. People are coming here because we went there first. We went there. We taught them the English language. And so they want to come to a place where they already have family members or friends, or where they already know the language.
And of course, some people would say, well, there are people who cross through lots of European countries, they are safe countries, there is a lot of English spoken there, that it's not right that you would cross through those safe places if you were fleeing and you could make a life there. I mean, some politicians say there should be a returns agreement with France. I mean, you're the Bishop of Dover, you've obviously seen the number of small boats that are making this crossing. That actually it would be a good idea to have an agreement with France where some people could be returned either to the country of origin or back to Europe. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, my understanding is that many other countries in Europe have far more migrants and receive far more than we do in any case. So to then ask them to take on even more, I think is unreasonable. Because they have passed through, they have a right to say, actually, that's the place we want to go for X, Y, or Z reasons. And with the kind of things that we're seeing with regards to climate change, if we don't start looking outwards and stop looking inwards, we're going to find even greater problems, because no one is just going to sit down and have the kind of climatic changes that is going to destroy their lives, their livelihood, and not move. Yeah. So this is an international problem, and it needs to be addressed internationally. And I want to see our government, of whatever kind or color, actually taking a real lead in this and addressing the issue for what it is.
I mean, the other proposal that the government has made is sending people to Rwanda, which is an agreement with Rwanda. The UK government would pay a certain amount of money to resettle people there. It's something that the European Union has also done over time in a slightly different way. Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Deeply uncomfortable. Because, here's our government saying, we want to break the business model. And then what does our government do? It creates a business model and traffic people to Rwanda. That's unacceptable.
That's what you see it as, trafficking
Absolutely.
people through Rwanda.
That's what we're doing. We're joining in. If we can't break them or beat them, then we'll join in. So that's what we're doing. That's unacceptable. And it's no good saying, well, Australia did it, or well, this other country did it. I think there is a moral imperative for us to step up and respond in a way that shows that we are addressing this in a humane way.
Would that be an amnesty, do you think?
I would like to see an amnesty, but we also have to put infrastructure in place. Infrastructure in terms of services in various communities. Because if we don't do that, then what we're doing in effect is setting up the local community and those who have come in.
I mean, I suppose if we take a step back and we think about the conversation that we're having here, it's often about institutions in this country and whether they are keeping up with the pace of change, recognising a problem, being able to try and solve it or do something about it, as you're suggesting. Anticipating. But it's not just the government and this problem. There is the royal family and the question of racism, there's the church and the question of gay marriage. Do you think institutions in this country are at the moment doing enough to keep up with the pace of change?
It's very difficult because institutions is exactly what the name has described. They are like huge boulders, and it takes a generation and more than a generation to shift, to make a dent in it. And some for religious reasons or other reasons will say, but we have to stick to this tradition. And the tradition may well have served us in a way that was best at that time. The question is, does it still serve us today? And what we think may have served well back then, if we were to truly look at it, then we would know that there are things that happened back then that would make us cringe and feel ashamed that our forebears took part in that kind of behavior. So I'm not always starry-eyed about institutions. What I want to see is, how do we resolve issues as they present themselves to us today? What are we drawing on to address them? And are we being humane? Are we being humane is an important test.
Do you think you can say yes to that question when it comes to gay marriage and the church?
I think the church has struggled with regards to gay marriage, because with regards to gay marriage, we're talking about people saying, we need equality. But actually, I believe that what people are really saying, because we ban the word equality around quite a bit, but what do we mean by equality? And I suspect that if we were to scratch that surface in relation to gay marriage, in relation to race, in relation to a number of things, what people are really saying is, hello there, I am a human being. Will you please accept me as a human being and not just as a label? And so part of not being a label is having the things that you have that makes you normal.
Yeah.
And they're saying, actually, I want to be in that space of normality. Now, in years to come, folks might decide, well, what does it look like, me being in that space of normality? And does it need necessarily to look exactly like that? Or how can I be accepted? I mean, I had someone who I came to know very well. He worked as a verger in one of the places where I served. And he'd been in a relationship with his partner for over 30 years. Over 30 years. Some marriages don't even make half that time. And he actually said something to me. He said, Rose, I don't want to be married. I think civil partnership is ours. But what I do know that he wanted to be is in that space of normality. You know, they say history is written, it's his story, it's written by the victor. So how do we, in inverted commas, who perceive ourselves as being heterosexual and normal, or white and normal, or male and normal, how do we begin to step outside of those boxes and actually see others as human beings, as we are, and allow them to be and to thrive and to flourish in that setting?
Some people would say that we as a country haven't done a very good job of that with race, and an example of that is the way that Meghan Markle has been treated.
I have deliberately tried not to engage with the Meghan Markle story, because I have felt very saddened about how she has been treated, and I think I would like to say that the media must take some responsibility for this, whereby they seem to feed lots of negative stories. So on a whole, I have not been, because I don't think it is about Meghan Markle. I think as media, as a society, we need to be honest with ourselves and ask why we say and do and behave, why we other certain people.
My final question to you is, given the conversation that we've had, do you think that faith can have a role and should have a role in politics? It's quite a live discussion right now, particularly in Scottish politics.
Yes. I believe very strongly. I was chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons, and what excited me about taking that role or applying for that role was because I felt passionately that faith should be in the public square. Faith is not a coat that when the weather is good, we put it on, and then we take it off again when it's nice and sunny and we don't need it. I think faith is who we are. The mistake we make is that we think of faith only in terms of a certain set of moral, stuff that we tick the box. We're not this, we're not that, and it's usually seen negatively. We're not so-and-so, we're not this, we're not that, and we keep ticking. Actually, faith has nothing to do with that. If we're going to live real faith, then it has to be lived in the communities and society of which we are a part. When I read scripture, I see a God who is interested in people's lives. I see a God who is interested in people's everyday lives. So, for example, in Leviticus, a book that there in Leviticus, be holy as I am holy. And that holiness was actually about how we live with one another, loving our neighbor. Jesus himself summarized the law. Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourselves. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus, spoke about, I was hungry, you didn't feed me. Thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was naked, you didn't clothe me. Sick, in prison, you didn't visit me. So these are all practical things that political life seeks to address. And that's what God's interested in. God's not interested in whether we talk about sex for 20 hours or however long or short in General Synod. God's not interested in that. God's not interested in whether we genuflect or whether we light the candles or whether we wave our arms around or we are slain on the floor or some other form. God's not interested in that. God is interested in how we care for those who are last, least, and lost. And that's what I'm interested in, and that's what my faith is about. It's not about a list of moral rules. Forget it. It is about how I live with God's creation, which includes God's people. So that faith, absolutely yes, in terms of life in politics.
Bishop Rose, thank you.
Thank you.